And pardon me if there's any coughing on that. I'm going to mute myself, but I'm a little bit sick. So, well, we're gonna turn this over to Ben, and thank you, Ben. Go ahead and take it over.
No problem. All right, welcome everybody. We're going to run through kind of what's new with Visual Studio 2013, and we're going to be looking mostly at what's new for developing websites, simply because that's kind of where most of the changes have occurred. So we're going to look at websites and services, and this is a kind of stock deck that Microsoft gives us MVPs that we can go ahead and do some presentations like this. But I'm going to kind of go off script a little bit here and there and just kind of show you some of the things that I've used on a day-to-day basis that I definitely enjoy. So real quick about me, hopefully most of you have some knowledge of who I am, but if not, you know, right there, I'm just a big kid, like it says, just a big kid that gets to do development on the side. I am technical director for a company called Aspenware. We do custom software for pretty much a lot of different stacks, but pretty much any web stack. So we do what's called rich web applications, which are more JavaScript-based single-page applications. And we do those both on the .NET stack and on the open source Node stack. I'm also a MVP in C# and a Telerik Insider. And basically those two things just mean that I do a lot of these types of talks and I evangelize kind of their products. Doesn't necessarily mean I'm an expert in any of their products. Doesn't mean that I'm necessarily their biggest fan either. So the whole point is that I'm out here in the community talking at things like this and talking to people like you guys who take the time to learn this stuff and giving that feedback to those two companies. Okay, let's just continue on. So real quick agenda here. We're going to talk about kind of this new concept of what's one ASP.NET. We're going to look at some of the new tooling. There's a brand new identity piece to ASP.NET. We're not going to look at light switch. We just don't have enough time to go through all of this stuff. Services we'll go through more of the Web API 2 stuff there. The Owen stuff is interesting, so I'll definitely mention that. And then we'll touch a little bit on Entity Framework 6. So those are the options that we're going to go through right now. So let's go ahead and talk about one ASP.NET. So this is kind of their new marketing buzzword that basically means that ASP.NET is ASP.NET. Whether you're using MVC, whether you're using web forms, whether you're doing an API, it's all ASP.NET. So again, the idea is that all of these are basically built on top of ASP.NET. So instead of when you go in to create a new project, and I'll demo this in a minute, instead of it asking you whether you want to do MVC or web forms, it's just going to say, do you want a web application? You say, yes, that's what I want to build, and then at that point it's going to ask you a few questions about what type, whether you want to be MVC, you know, what kind of authentication are you going to use, those types of things come into play with ASP.NET 1, or one ASP.NET, if you will. So again, no upfront decision about what you're going to use. You know, it's kind of bootstrapped in, and it's also using Bootstrap.js. It's a popular CSS layout framework. So that's already kind of built in for you. And there's a completely new scaffolding system. For those of you who are familiar with MVC, you can kind of go in and say, I want a new controller and view for this entity framework model or entity in the entity framework model. And basically the scaffolding now, it works for MVC, but you can also scaffold some stuff in web forms as well. So they've kind of bridged that over so you can do that kind of on both platforms or both types of technology if you want. So again, here's the idea is that when I say I want to build a web application, it's going to come up and it's going to ask me, you know, what type do you want? Notice there's also an empty there, which is very interesting. And you know, sometimes that may be what you want to do if you're in the open source world. You may just want a empty project where you can start, you know, building your Node or your JavaScript-based applications. There's also, it's interesting, there's also a mobile in there, and there's also that Facebook one in there. So they've kind of built some templates. You can also download other templates that fit into this this option box here, and and get more options as far as what type of application you want to create. So, you know, the bottom line, and in my mind anyways, you know, the empty one is there for those of us who want full control. But for those of us who kind of want to kickstart and a jumpstart and just kind of have an application that's kind of architected and built out for us, these other templates are really good for those types of things. Notice down there, down below the select template area, there's that add folders and core references. And so notice there you can actually, you know, you can say I want to do MVC, but you can say I also have a certain portion of my site that's going to be web forms, so I'm going to add that as well. Or a lot of times what you may want to do is have an MVC site and a web API site that kind of use the same back-end technology. You know, that's nice. It kind of gives you the opportunity to do those both at the same time. You can also add your unit tests, as you can see down there. There's also this configure authentication, which is interesting. Notice here it's set to individual user account. So this is going to use the classic, you know, ASP.NET authentication. But we'll see in a minute when you hit configure authentication, you have some options as far as choosing, I want to authenticate using Twitter, I want to authenticate using Facebook. You know, there's different types of authentications that you can put into play. So, so we'll take a look at that here in a few minutes. And actually, let's just take a look at it now. So a couple things. So this is Visual Studio 2013. You know, before I get too far into some of this, I just kind of want to give you a lap around some of the stuff that's new that I enjoy. The first thing that's interesting is that when you first log into Visual Studio 2013, it asks you to log in with your Microsoft account. So that's kind of nice because it allows you to switch context a lot easier than you used to. So for those of us who, you know, work on web applications at work and then go home and work on web applications for either personal or kind of on the side, entrepreneurial type jobs, it's nice to be able to switch between the account I'm used for work and my personal account that I'm using for, you know, personal things that I do. And so you can do that up here real quickly by just connecting with, you know, connecting as somebody else and switching over to a different context. So that's kind of nice. The other nice thing is that if you are using TFS, or I guess they call it Visual Studio in the cloud at this point, but you can also have TFS local and point this there as well. They've kind of revamped the Team Explorer over here to make it a little bit easier to get around, and also to switch context, which is nice. So here, I've only got one solution in here now. This is kind of my personal demo machine. But at work, I've got a bunch of different projects that are lined up in here. It's really easy for me to pick out the project that I worked on last and go straight to that project. So a lot of the innovations, a lot of the changes that have been made are more around this Team Explorer and kind of how to connect to your work and your source control that you're using. So those are just kind of a few things right out of the box that are new, that are nice to have. The rest of the stuff is kind of familiar. You got your same old start page that you always have. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to create a new project. And then I just want you to see kind of what I'm doing here as far as when I go to web, you know, underneath web, I just have this one ASP.NET Web application. There's nothing else that I can pick. If I go to Visual Studio 2012, it goes back to the old where there's, you know, a handful of different ones that I can choose. But if I'm on web, I just have this one, and you know, we'll just call them. That's fine. We'll just put it right there. It doesn't matter to me, and we'll move on from there. And so here's this screen that came up again. So in this case, we'll do an MVC app, we'll add a web API, and we'll add unit testing. And so here's where things get interesting when I hit this change authentication right here. Notice I've got individual user accounts, and if you notice, it says, you know, basically, you know, the profiles are stored at SQL Server, but the user can sign in with Facebook, Twitter, Google, Microsoft, or you can add some other providers as well. If you don't need authentication, you can turn that off. If you go to organizational accounts, you know, it kind of asks you, where's your Active Directory, and it'll kind of plug some of that stuff in. What's your domain? Those types of things. And then Windows is for internet-based applications. So it's kind of nice that they built some of this stuff right out of the box so that I can make some of these decisions up front and have it baked into the solution. So I'm going to go hit OK, and I'm going to show you kind of what it is, what it does build when it's done with this. So it's churning away. The one downside that I do see to this is that some of the templates can get a little bit bloated. So if you notice, it's adding a bunch of different frameworks and JavaScript things to the solution, which you may or may not use them all. So that part of it I'm not really that excited about, but there are some great things that are happening with these new templates. And one is Bootstrap. So here it says theming with Bootstrap. So if you click on this, it'll take you to a nice place where it will show you how to do theming with Bootstrap. For those of you who don't know, there's a website. The one that I use is called wrapbootstrap.com, and it's amazing. There's tons of Bootstrap themes for style that use Bootstrap, and they're 10, 15. Some of them, you may be able to find some that are a couple $100. But there's a lot of really nice ones that are really inexpensive that give you a whole, fonts and color schemes for those of us who are, design impaired. It's nice to be able to go out and get, kind of a nice looking design that you can then customize for, $10 or $15. So again, it's just wrapbootstrap.com is the URL to do that. And then if you look over here under content, you'll see Bootstrap is already in here. So even if you're not going to use a Bootstrap theme that's out there, you can just take advantage of Bootstrap's grid layout system using your custom CSS as well. So that's kind of nice. But the interesting thing is up here in this app_start folder is where a lot of interesting things happen. The first one I want to look at is kind of the startup.auth folder here. So let's take a look at this, and then if you notice, well, let me go ahead and hide that right now. First thing that you may notice right off the bat is this toolbar. The toolbar over here now has preview, which is kind of cool. So I can scroll up and down, and then I can also hover on it and get a preview of the code. So if I say, all right, I'm looking for that line right there, I can find it over here in the toolbar, click on it, and it'll take me to that location. Obviously, you can't really see the power of it because this is such a small file right here. But when you get larger code bases, that becomes very useful. And I don't believe that is on out of the box. So if you come up here to the quick launch and you type in scroll bar, sorry, I think I called it toolbar earlier. If you type in scroll bar, I think it's in the basic ones. Let's go look here. Yeah, so down here you can see where I can turn this off. So if you don't like that, if it's taking up too much space, I can just go to normal scroll bars if I want to. But I can also turn that on and off as far as whether that thing shows up on there or not. So a couple things there. The scroll bar is kind of cool. The ability to turn it off and on is really cool. But then also this quick launch up here is just an easy way for you to get to different settings that you have. So like if I wanted to, not font. So if I wanted to, change my fonts and colors, I can just type font up there, click on the top one, it takes me to where I am, and let's just say I want to bump it up to 14 for a presentation. I can do that real quick, and now everything's automatically bumped up. So the quick launch bar is definitely your friend, and you can see there's a shortcut there for Control-Q, so you can get and change things. One of the things, so if I do Control-Q and type in line numbers, all right, I'd like to turn line numbers on, and there it is. So now I can refer to the line numbers that we have. So again, that's a handy feature. Let's get back to what ASP.NET 1 or 1 ASP.NET, I always get that backwards, did for us. So here, notice it says that it automatically turns on cookie authentication. That is kind of going to use the authentication that we know and love with all ASP.apps. But notice down here, it automatically has these lines in here for us to set up our different login structures that we want. So if we want to use Microsoft account authentication, that's easy. You have to go out and register your developer account, and then you can put your keys, your app IDs, and your secrets in here. And then basically at that point, what it will do is, let me go ahead and run this, and I'll show you kind of where that would sit. It also has a new kind of look and feel to it, the new MVC template does. So it's firing up my local. So here, when I go to register, there's usually, once I enable Facebook, there'll be another button over here that says log in with Facebook. So as you start adding those different things, Twitter, Facebook, etc., you'll start getting buttons over here that allow users to register with those. And once you click on that, it's that experience that we've all seen where it kind of takes you to Facebook, and Facebook says log in. You log in with Facebook, and then it'll come up and say, this app, whatever it happens to be called, wants to be able to post on your behalf, or whatever they've set up for that app. And you can say, yes, I give it authority to do that. And then, bam, you're registered with this application, and now you can use your Facebook login to log into the application. So that's really, really cool. The other thing that you'll see is if you notice down here, there's like this little toolbar down here that has some interesting things on it. So if I say design, now all of a sudden I'm linked in here, and I can go in here and like change some of the stuff. So let's say I don't like the fact that it's called username. I'm going to call it I don't know, let's just say first name, all right? Bam, I can do that and move on, and now it will save that off as I go back. If I go back to design mode, then I can change some of these other things. Instead of register, maybe I wanted to call it login. There's a bunch of different things that you can do to turn that on and off. And then notice it kept that. So if we go back to back to that register form, you pop over to the Solution Explorer, we go to the views, we go to account, and go to register. Notice that it must have actually changed it, because this is actually using Razor to do a label 4, so it must have actually changed that all the way through to the model that it's using for that particular one. It'd be interesting to see if it did do that. Just take a quick look. Register view model required. See, it's interesting. The name still says username there, so I'm not sure. Maybe it hasn't saved it back. It's supposed to. Let's see what happens if I shut it down and start it again. Let's see if it makes that change. Let's fire it up again. I just want to make sure that change sticks. It stuck for me when I tested it earlier, but let's just double check that. So we go to register. No, I did go back to username. So there must be something that I didn't do right to get that to save off. But if you look that up, I know that there is a way that you can save that back to back to the database and have it actually show up. So we'll move on from that. So the other thing that I wanted to show you was the scaffolding portion. So if we look, there's a couple models already over here. But if I come up here to the controllers and I right-click, and then I say, I am in stop mode, I should be able to, let's see. I'm not sure why I'm not getting the new item context right now. Am I not in the right place? I apologize, this is looking weird. Open with, scope to this. See, it should be on this one where I say, oh, there it is, add, sorry. Add, and then I say new scaffolded item. So I click on that, and then up pops this nice little wizard that says, okay, what do you want to do? I can do an empty controller, or I can just say I want to do a view related to a controller. There's also Web API 2 things, which we'll get to that here a little bit later on. But in this case, let's try to create one for the entity framework. And in this case, we'll just call it I don't know, DemoController. And then it's going to ask me what class I want to use. And right now, I basically just have the ones that came out of the box, but obviously you probably have your own models eventually when you got to this point. So let's just say manage view model. And it's going to say what data context, because it knows that not only do we have that view model, but we know that it's tied to a specific entity framework DB context. So I'm going to hit that. I want to generate views. I want to use the page layout, and I'm ready to go. Can everybody still hear me okay? That's not good. Oh, it has no keys defined, so that was not a good one to pick. Okay.
Yeah, just so you know, everything sounds fine, right? Everything sounds fine.
Okay. Thanks, Gabriel. Let's try application user. I'm just trying to pick one that actually has the right stuff that needs to be ran in order to get it. So I may have to pull in one of my own models for this one. I can't remember which one I used a second ago when I was testing this. So, so let's go to here and let's try something new. So, so if I go here and I say add, let's instead try to just add a view, and we'll give it a view name of demo view. And we'll say it's going to be a details view, and let's see if we can do this for the register one and context. Okay. Yeah, see, for some reason it just does not like the metadata for those entity types, and I just don't think that I'm picking the right one. But you can see how easy it would be to go in and basically fire up that scaffolding there and get that thing up and running. Maybe a little bit later I'll come back to that. I have an application that has some actual entity framework models that I created for my own purposes, and it definitely works better with those. So, but I think you get an idea of how that would work and how you could get that set up as far as firing off your models and kind of generating some code for you. So let's fire back over to the slide deck here. Identity, so AKA membership, and I kind of already showed you a lot of this. So there's a lot of new things around here, but if you look, it says AKA membership because I think most of us are probably used to creating membership providers for ASP.NET that either talk to Active Directory or talk to some other membership type of thing that we have set up behind the scenes, and so this is actually a complete rewrite of that old membership stuff. So it's nice. It can be used different from just ASP.NET technologies. So that means it doesn't have to be identity just for the ASP.NET. It could work for your Windows-based applications and things along that line. And again, it also integrates with external providers, which we already saw. So I don't know that we need to go through that one again because I've already demoed that one. So let's move on to the browser link highlights, which is kind of nice. So I kind of showed you the HTML editor and the way that you can kind of change things inside of your browser. So it also can make changes in Visual Studio and force an update to the connected browsers. So it's a bi-directional channel. So like you saw when I was in design mode, I changed something, and those changes will filter back to the actual code. But also I can make changes in Visual Studio and relink my browsers, and I can see those changes automatically in the browser without having to stop it, make a change, fire it up again, and get it to work. So let's take a look at kind of how that works with the solution that we have open. So let's just go make a change to one of the views. Well, first let's fire it up. So that way we can see the linking in action. Give it a second to fire up. So let's just change this piece right here. So the interesting thing is if we go back to here, you can see there's this little refresh button. And it says browser link, and it says how many browsers I have connected. So I have Chrome connected. But let's go back. And let's fire up IE as well. Let's paste that in there. And then if we go back here, we should now see 2 browsers. Yep, see, so now we have Chrome. If I hit this down thing, I can refresh them all. There's a couple of things. But if you just hover on it, you can see that I have a Chrome and an Internet Explorer attached to this particular website at this time. So let's go ahead and make a change to that home index view. So here's the index view, and instead of ASP.NET, let's change it to their nice little catchphrase of one ASP.NET. And then now without I do need to save all, but now without rebuilding or doing anything else, I can just say refresh. And then now you can see that it's automatically refreshed to this browser. And if I go over to, oh, I was on IE there. If I go to Chrome, it's automatically refreshed to that browser as well. Now let's see, I just want to know if I can get that change to filter its way back. Let's say, let's call this the only one, ASP.NET. And then I'm just wondering how if I get back out of design mode. First of all, did it make it over to here? No. Did it make it back to Visual Studio? Yeah, so it did actually update back here to Visual Studio. So if I hit refresh again, then it should, yeah, so now it's made it to the other browser. So you can make changes in a browser and they go back to Visual Studio like we saw right here is where it actually made the change. But then in order to refresh any of the other linked browsers, you have to go ahead and do a refresh. So just to show you guys that again, it's actually pretty cool. So now let's get rid of the only one and just make it, one. And then at that point, I switched it back. So if we come here, you'll see it changed it to one ASP.NET there. And then if we go to Chrome, it's not there yet. If we refresh the links, go back to Chrome, you'll see now it made it back. So again, it's really kind of a cool technology to allow you to, and really the coolest thing is to play with the CSS and things like that, and you can do it in the in Visual Studio, and then of course if you had multiple monitors, like if you're not in a presentation like this, you can do multiple monitors, and you can have your site up and running on one and Visual Studio on the other, and you can be making changes, hit refresh, and see it right there. So it actually makes it much cleaner to play with the design and get it to look just right. So that's a nice new feature, one of the major new features with Visual Studio 2013. All right, let's go back to the slides. And let's talk about some of the other things that are new. So Owen, this is kind of interesting technology. So basically, it's a standard for connecting servers to frameworks. So what that means is that you could basically run your APIs on any Owen compliant host. So basically, I think what this is targeted to, and we're not going to see a demo or really go into this very heavily today, but just so you guys understand what Owen is, and if you're interested, you can go do some more research on it. But basically, this is a way for you to create your web APIs and then host them on an open source platform if you want. It says you can host on basically any Owen compliant host. So you can have your own process to host it. If you don't want to host it inside of IIS, you can do that. And I'm pretty sure that there are Owen providers and hooks for Linux and other types of servers as well. So it's a very interesting concept, and if you're curious about it, definitely go out and do some more research on it. But what I really want to talk about is ASP.NET Web API 2. So Web API 2 has some upgrades as far as security there. It's Owen compliant. It's still the same old Web API that you know and love, but there are definitely some changes to it that we're going to see here in a few minutes when we take a quick look at the demo. But CORS is all about cross-origin requests, or for some of you who've been around, cross-site scripting and those types of things. Basically what this does is it allows you to enable CORS so that somebody other than the origin can make calls into your APIs. So if you create an API that's just for your mobile app, that's fine. And if it's all, basically being called from the, from that one app, and it's authenticating and setting up through your mobile app, everything's fine. But let's say let's say you're Facebook and you want to open your APIs to, pass.com or whatever, then you have to open those APIs and you have to be able to accept requests from www.pass.com. And so this is how you can do that on it says here, for per action, meaning you can do it for just one method or one action on your API, or you can do it for a whole container or a whole controller, meaning, okay, we want to give this application access to our APIs for putting posts, out on our website, or uploading photos to our website, and that's it. We don't want them to touch users or do anything else. Then we could put it on the controller for photos, or maybe you want to do it globally and say, this website has access to our complete API, and they can make any calls that they want. So if you look at this, this is kind of how you would do it on a controller. You could also move this down on top of your actions, or you can also, again, do it globally. So that's kind of a cool thing. Attribute routing is, I think, is going to be one of the major features of this particular release. And the reason I say that is because if you look at the way that you're doing routing now, so this is kind of how routing works now, where I have to go to, and let's just look at it real quick so that everybody understands what I'm talking about, is that when you're doing routing, if I go to my app.start and I go to my route.config, so here I have to go in, if I want to have some custom routing, I have to go in and I have to actually do these routes down here inside of C#, and they're kind of away from the actual place where the routing, where I kind of want the routing to occur. So again, this is kind of how it runs now, and so the next way that it's going to work is that instead of doing that, now we can put the attribute route. So now I can just say, allow HTTP attribute routes, and now I can just put this this attribute on top of my controller. And now right inside of my controller, I know what the route is to get to this particular method inside of my API. So again, very, very helpful, very useful, and I've got a feeling that this is how we're going to be doing routes, because if you look at this particular route, APIs, especially if you're doing Rust, can be pretty straightforward if you're doing the standard get, put, post, and delete, those types of things. Those are easy because those methods are created for you. But in this case, this guy has this particular method has a specific route that they want to do that's custom. It's outside of the normal gets, gets, puts, creates, all those things that you do. And so this makes it a lot easier to create those and get those out there so that people can use them. And then there's also, optional values. So here I can pass in, parameters, but I don't have to pass in a zip code. So again, in this case, if I pass in a zip code, then I can also put default values. But in this case, if a zip code doesn't come in, it's still going to hit this particular method in my API, and I can just return demographics for all zip codes. But if somebody does pass me a specific zip code, then at that point I can return the zip code for or a value for that particular zip code. Nice too, over here we have default values that you can throw in as well to make sure that things look and act correctly. So attribute routing is going to be powerful. So So OData, I think OData has been around for a long time, so I'm not going to go really too deep into OData. The thing about OData is it's great because it is a standardized way to do a lot of these things. But a lot of people these days go with REST, which is just a little bit cleaner, a little bit smaller, and doesn't seem to be as cumbersome as using OData. So it's kind of up to you and what your application needs to do. So there's a lot of nice things that it's put in for doing OData. There's OData libraries. There's open source contributors. So I mean, again, we could do a whole session on OData and how to get it to work with web APIs, but we just don't have time for that in this hour session today. ASP.NET SignalArm. So if I were to go back to the beginning slide where I showed what one ASP.NET is, SignalArm was on that list. And so if you haven't ever used SignalArm or you haven't seen a demo of it, go check it out because it is an amazing piece of technology that ASP.NET has built. And what SignalArm allows you to do is to basically communicate between the browser and the server pretty much real time. And it does that using WebSockets if the browser is capable of doing that. If it doesn't, it will downgrade itself to polling and work its way. So basically, it's cross-browser. It's browser agnostic, if you will. So I could be running this in IE7, and it would still work, even though IE7 is not an HTML5 compliant browser. It would still work, and it still works relatively well, even in older browsers. So if you think about, I mean, like all of these things over here that it talks about is really cool, dashboards and monitoring. So basically, the server can, normally in a browser server application, you have to hit refresh, right? So if I have a dashboard and I want to see, what's moving, what's happening with my system, I have to hit refresh to get all the updates. Well, in this case, if you're using SignalArm, the server can actually, send out events or update the dashboard independently of me hitting refresh, so that I always have live data streaming in to my dashboard, which is huge. Collaborative anything. So again, if you're going to do chat applications or touch devices are so popular these days, if you want to allow people to touch and draw on pictures and stuff, and both parties be able to see what you're doing, you can do those types of things with SignalArm, and it's surprisingly lightweight and surprisingly simple to understand and use. So please go out and look at SignalArm. So there's some extra information here about SignalArm and what you can use it with. So again, you can get some of this information out there. I'm running a little low on time. I could definitely show you some of the attribute routing. OData, Owen, and SignalArm you can go look up yourself. We could definitely go look at some of the Web API 2 stuff, but let's move on and finish up with Entity Framework, and then I'll get to the demo and try to show you both of those kind of at the same time. So Entity Framework 6 is interesting because it's now open source, so you can see that at the top. So the interesting piece about that is that now you can get nightly builds, you can see the issues, you can even see the source code if you want. The nice thing is that only the EF team will commit the rights, so you can definitely contribute if you want, but there's a review process for changes. So if you definitely feel like you know how Entity Framework should work, and you found a bug and you want to fix it yourself, you can go get the source, and then you can put that in, and you'll be good to go at that point. So it's kind of a nice new thing there too. So what's new? The biggest one here is async query and save. So async is a huge feature of C# that's been out for a while, and it used to not be embedded and ingrained in everything Entity Framework 6 did. Now it is, so it'll definitely help with performance. There's also a lot of changes. Most of the changes have come to code first type implementations. So it seems like a lot of people are going that route, but the EDMX route is still there and is still usable if you need to go that way. Okay, let's take a look at a few of these things. I think I have about 5 minutes, and then we'll open it up for questions. Okay, so the first thing that I'd like to show you is some of the API stuff that has been added. So if you look at the account controller, remember when we picked our application and we set it all up, we said we wanted to be MVC and Web API. And so what it does by that is it gives some of these extra attributes in here for setting up your actual APIs. And let me just see, it almost looks like, did we actually, let me just double check. And most of the time you can get your APIs if you do this /API. So if you go to your root /API, you can usually find that. And I'm not seeing it in this particular one, so let's just fire up a new one. Oh, whoops, that's not what I wanted to do, sorry. What I want to do is let's just add one to this current solution real quick. So I'll say, oh, I'm running, stop. Let me add one to this solution real quick. So we'll say add, new project. And again, it's just an ASP.NET project. We'll call it .API. Say OK. And then this time we'll definitely do Web API. I thought I checked that last time, but maybe I did not. So again, if you look down here in controllers, we have this home controller, which is just basically to handle that home page, which will be your API. And then down here is the actual API values or API methods. So notice we got a get that returns a enumerable or a list of data. We've got a get that just does one, and then we've got all these posts and puts and deletes out here. So again, these are all valid API things. And so if we just run this guy, now we'll see what the API homepage looks like, because this is the API project that's running now. So now I have this little API button up here. So if I click on that, it'll actually take me and it'll show me, what APIs are out here. So this is kind of nice because it's kind of its own built-in help documentation. If I click on one of those, it actually gives me, what I'm going to get back. If I'm doing XML or JSON, it actually shows what's going to be returned from those. So that's kind of a nice thing that you get right out of the box. And so if I wanted to call one of these, I can come up here now and I can say API/values. And then notice here, in this case, it defaulted to XML, but I actually do get my values back. So that's a nice new feature, or kind of how web APIs are set up now. One of the nice things that we have as well in kind of the new setup. Well, first of all the help and everything there is really a nice feature. But then also what you get is we've got home and we got values, and I apologize, I forgot to click on the account one, but it also comes with all the identity stuff that I showed you earlier. So it comes with the Facebook and the Twitter integration and all that kind of stuff that you can set up when you click on those things in order to do your API. So real quick, let me just look at the identity model, and let's just look at some of the EF stuff, and then we'll go ahead and finish up. So this is kind of the same way that you do default connections and default setups for your APIs with Entity Framework 6. And unfortunately, this is not a very good example because it doesn't have anything in here. But you can go ahead and add profile data to your views and your models. And if you notice this, this has a lot of information about identity, but it doesn't actually save any of this stuff off right now, so that's some plumbing that you have to put in as far as what you're going to save for logging in and things of that nature. So unfortunately, I don't have a very good entity framework example set up and ready to go. But once you get it, you'll see that it basically does all the async calls for you, so that you can get back tasks instead of actual data, so that you can make those asynchronous calls. And that's probably the biggest feature of Entity Framework 6 at this point. All right, let's just go ahead and finish up here real quick. We're going to just go past light switch. If you're interested in light switch, it is a nice way to kind of build internal apps very, very quickly. So it's something that you might want to look into if you're interested and see a demo of how it works and things like that. And you also have access to this slide deck, so you can go through and see some of the nice new things that we have there. So here's kind of a summary. The nice thing is that all of ASP.NET Web stuff kind of works together. It all has similar features, and everything's ready to go. And then, of course, it says easier than ever to build modern applications, which modern applications are kind of a loosely defined term, but modern applications are more of a client-server-based application. So if you think of more of a SPA, which is a single-page application, which basically means that you download the all the JavaScript for the application to the browser, and then it just talks via APIs back to the server in order to get data. That would be considered a modern application. All your mobile applications are modern applications as well. So it is definitely built for that with the Web API 2 stuff that you can do. And then again, if you're into some serious rapid application development, light switch is a good option for you. So here's some links that you can kind of get into. You can download Visual Studio, get the free trial. You can also try Visual Studio Online. So if you have MSDN, you can sign up for, or you get a certain amount of time on visualstudio.com. And basically visualstudio.com is the TFS on a server, or TFS, sorry, in the cloud option that you can connect to. So that's very nice. And then also, if you do have an MSDN account, you get free cycles inside of Windows Azure. So that's another thing to try if you do have MSDN benefits. If you don't have those MSDN benefits, I think the cost for using these tools are very, very little, and most of them you get free trial accounts. So I definitely encourage all of you to go out and see how Visual Studio 2013 and TFS in the cloud and Azure are all nicely integrated together and kind of come together as a nice package to help you develop your application, and not just a Hello World application, but a an enterprise quality, consumer quality app, and get it out the door very, very quickly. So that is all I have. I don't know if there were any questions along the way, but I can certainly take those. Let me go back to, let me just throw my contact information up again. So if anybody wants to get hooked up with me, they can email me. And that is it. So are there any questions out there?
I don't currently see any questions on the board, but I do have a question actually myself. So this question is for you. Does 2013 come with the same Visual Studio Express versions that gives you full ability to develop some apps with most features?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, there definitely is the Express version. And those, I mean, if there's anyone out there doing Windows 8 development, the Express editions are a good way to get into that type of development. So, because the new versions of Visual Studio 2013 support, the latest version of Windows, the 8.1 version of Windows. So, if you're interested in just kind of as a hobby building some apps for Windows 8 or Windows Phone, the Express editions can let you do that from you can build a full-blown app. But the other, most of the restrictions that you have, with the Express editions of 2012 are kind of the same ones you have in 2013 for professional. Absolutely.
Okay. Great. I really don't see any other questions right now at the time. There's probably there's a few more minutes here on your time. I don't know if you want to go a little bit more over SignalArm or some. Yeah.
Yeah, let me pull up. Well, there's a couple things that that didn't go well that I can definitely show again. So let me close this. And let me see if I can open. These are some of the personal projects that I work kind of on the side, and I may be able to show a little bit more some of the entity framework features and things like that I have. So this is an application I'm calling Scrum Chores, which is basically the idea is that I run projects at work in an agile fashion. And so why not, get my kids involved in that? Why not, run an agile shop at home as well, and get them involved in, running and doing their chores in an agile fashion as well. So,
wow.
So that's kind of the idea of the app, and I'm trying to build it using some of these new technologies, and of course I'm using all of Telerik's products as well. So Kendo UI and a product called Icenium. But if we look in here, you know what? I don't have the latest version down here. I was going to show some of the entity framework stuff, but I don't have that available to me on this demo machine. Darn it. So I'm trying to think. I wish I could show you some more SignalArm stuff, but I don't have any of that set up on this demo machine right now. So unfortunately, I can't show you that. But I could have swore. I have definitely gone a lot further than what we're seeing right here, but I'm afraid it would take me the 5 minutes that I have to get it down and get it configured from TFS.
Sure.
But if you look over at TFS, I mean, you can see that this is in there. I could easily go and get the latest and pull it down and see if it would compile. But I don't think we're going to have enough time for that right now. So.
Right. Sure.
So if there are no other questions, hopefully that gives you a good idea from a web standpoint. I didn't show a lot of the Azure integration, so if you're interested in those, if you go, the best place to probably get those is if you go to southcolorado.net, which is the user group site where we also did this launch. There's a series of links that have all the slide decks for all the other sessions that go on at the launch events. So you can go get those slide decks and also get the sample code and play with it yourself. That's probably the best way to learn it anyway. But the things that I showed you today should give you an idea of what's possible. And then you got to go out and dig in and get the details to really build it up into your application.
Great. All right. Well.
All right.
We definitely appreciate having you over, Ben. And this was
no problem. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's been pretty enlightening. If you folks want to, watch this presentation over again, we should have it up on our YouTube page early in the week, this coming week. So thanks again for coming over, and don't forget to sign up at the AppDev website at appdev.sequelpass.org. And thanks again for presenting, Ben.
Yeah, no problem. Anytime.
All right, folks. Appreciate it. And we'll be seeing you next month. We will be back next month at the first Friday of the month. And next month we're going to have Ike Alice, who will be doing a presentation in continuous integration and development, with database development and continuous integration as well. So thanks again, guys. You guys have a very good weekend.